So generally I don't spend much time on social media, and I stay away from any kind of drama. Although that's where the views are, it's just not my style, don't want anything to do with it. However, I randomly stumbled upon a social media post by a few people who still seem to be holding a grudge over some tests I did about 2 years ago or so. And this is something that has come up every now and then, and I feel like I should talk a bit more about it. And that is testing and how hard I am on certain things in tests, particularly arms and armor. There were several axes and other pole arms from arms and armor that broke on camera during my tests. The first one was the Hungarian Axe, and this happened after several bouts of hard use. We did some tests on helmets, and it held up quite well. At first, there were several really hard strikes where the axe didn't take any noticeable edge damage or anything like that, until Eric started out on his quest of building a reputation as the axe breaker. And this was a pretty particular circumstance, because the way it hit, it connected right with the bottom. So this is a pretty nasty angle. There was a lot of stress on the axe shaft right under the head, and so this is where it popped off. And generally I wouldn't have minded that too much. However, when I took a closer look at it, the wood looked a bit strange, especially under magnification. Personally, I'm not an expert on wood by any means, or a woodworker or anything, so I asked people on that video what they thought, and there were several people, carpenters and other people who work with wood, who had different opinions on it. Some said it didn't look too unusual. Some suspect that there was dry rot going on, so different opinions on that. I couldn't really form a good, well-informed opinion on that. It didn't seem quite right to me, but that's all I could say. Anyway, so they sent me another pole to replace it with, and I rehafted it. It's all good. Haven't had any problems since. Then the next thing was the pole axe. And this happened literally on the very first hit. And it was not the hardest hit I could have done. And I'm not even a particularly strong guy. And so this was surprising, that this would just bend and the wood started to get damaged from one hit. Now, some people think this is being hard on it, and it's also what Craig at Arms and Armor said, that I'm hard on my stuff. I don't really think so. And here's why. This is a weapon that was designed specifically for use against full steel plate. The knightly poleaxe, used by knights and men-at-arms in plate armor against other knights and men-at-arms with the same sort of protection. So this was designed to be an anti-armor weapon. It was supposed to dent armor, pierce it, thrust into the gaps of the armor, deliver concussions and whiplash and other debilitating injuries like that to the wearer of heavy armor. So on a battlefield, you would have had to rely on this weapon. Of course, things break, especially on the battlefield. There is an expectation that it's never going to last for a long time, and there were sidearms, and there was the possibility to pick up weapons off the ground, etc., etc. But it would have to last for more than a couple of strikes. And my personal expectation is that a reproduction of a historical weapon should be at least as good as the original. Why do I say at least? Because we have much better materials available now. Modern crucible steel is far more pure and just of much higher quality, more consistent heat treatment and tempering than anything they had in history. So we can do a lot better. Now, of course, nowadays, nobody's life depends on those weapons anymore, obviously. But in a certain price range, I do like to hold manufacturers to that sort of standard, and I generally can. I mean, I found out that in the price range of $500 and up, especially $800 and up, there are plenty of really, really amazingly well-made examples of historical reproductions that will hold up. I mean, I have done the same helmet tests with swords that have held up, and another axe, also by Arms and Armor, that did just fine, did not break despite pretty hard use on the helmets. The pole hammer from Arms and Armor I tested on a modern motorcycle helmet, which should technically cushion the blow a little more. And it held up at first on the helmet, and then it failed on the zombie head itself. So it was probably accumulated stress from before, from testing on the helmet. But just a piece of wood just popping off like that, and also the entire thing started to rattle. I noticed, so the spike wasn't attached securely enough and it became loose. Things like that. Now, we can debate this, of course. You can absolutely say, well, you're expecting too much. It's for the modern market. It's for collectors. Most people are not going to use them, etc., which, are fair objections. I just think that a functional reproduction in this price range should be able to do the things that originals were expected to do. That's just my personal opinion. Somebody talked about a YouTuber, not mentioned by name, who broke a Dane axe by hitting a tree. Personally, I've never hit a tree with a Dane axe for the purpose of reviewing the axe. There was this one case where I tested a piece of leather armor and didn't have any good test setup available and ran out of light and time and patience and just strapped it up to a tree. Yeah, that's not something I recommend at all. However, it was fine. It didn't break. This is still the same Dane axe. Nothing ever happened to it. The shaft is perfectly fine. So that went well. And there is a difference between abusing your stuff and making clear that it's abuse and testing something for review. The kind of abusive test that I did, for example, with several Albion swords, like the Gutjald and the Berserker. I put them through hell pretty much. So there was a lot of wood chopping, and the more moderate chopping tests are appropriate in my opinion. Something like this, moderately sized branches as opposed to entire trees, and relatively fresh ones that are not overly hard, things like that, because weapons would have had to chop through bone, meet shields and other weapons and all of that. So you'd have to expect them to be sturdy enough to survive that. But there are some things that definitely are in the abusive realm, and I generally try to make it clear when I do abusive tests. And when I do, I don't have the expectation that those swords or other weapons need to emerge perfectly unscathed and need to be flawless. This is really more pushing it to the next level. That's what I do with a sword, for example, that I have full confidence in. Like Albion swords, I have enough experience with them to know the construction and the material quality, and I know that they will be able to handle it. And if there is some minor damage, like a slight bend or whatever, that's perfectly fine. And also I try to adjust the test to the type of weapon that I'm evaluating. In earlier videos, I may have been too inexperienced at some points to make the right call. Of course, I make mistakes like everybody else, and sometimes I misjudge a weapon maybe, and then I might be too hard on it. However, so far, I haven't actually broken any sword in an actual review. Aside from a deliberate effort to destroy something, I've never actually broken a sword blade in tests. The worst that has happened is that something would loosen up substantially. The guard would loosen up, or the entire hilt assembly starts to come apart, or something bends, or edge chipping, things like that. So relatively moderate damage. In some cases, damage that shows a problem with the construction when it loosens up too easily, but never a really catastrophic failure. So I think overall it's within the realm of the reasonable. But again, I'm only human. I still see myself as more of an enthusiast than an expert, and I make mistakes. I make the wrong calls sometimes, and I always appreciate constructive criticism and feedback that helps me to grow and improve and do things better. So if you think that some of the tests have been inaccurate or unfair or unreasonable, or some of my conclusions have been off, by all means, feel free to tell me, and please be as specific as you can. The more precise your arguments are, the more helpful they are, and the more they allow me to do things better in the future. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on this for right now. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and have a good one, folks.